Welcome to WOW, the Woman of the Week podcast series from Pharma Voice. This week's episode has been made possible by a generous sponsorship from Calcium. For more information, visit calciumusa.com. In this episode, Taryn Grome, editor-in-chief of Pharma Voice magazine, meets with Kathy Vandebelt, global head of clinical innovation, Oracle.
Kathy, welcome to the Pharma Voice WOW podcast program.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and it was so great to get to meet you in person last week at the CNS Summit. What a treat.
It was wonderful to catch up with you in person. I know we get to hear about each other over web, over email, and so forth. And yes, it was a treat to actually see you in face-to-face. So it was lovely to catch up.
And we got to enjoy a little bit of Florida sunshine, too. So I've done some research on you, and I would love for you to share your career journey. I know you were at Lilly for, almost 30 years, a little bit more than 30 years. And so let's talk about your Lilly years, and then what ultimately led you to be named Global Head of Clinical Innovation at Oracle. That's quite a leap.
Sure. So actually, though not planned, I actually was at Lilly 30 years to the nose. I actually joined Lilly in Canada at a pivotal time when the patent laws actually changed for the pharmaceutical industry. There was a new law passed known as Bill 22. I had just graduated with my pharmacology degree from the University of Toronto, and what this new law meant was that the patent protection was extended to be in line with other countries like the United States and other industries that existed in Canada. And what that meant was that in order for that patent protection to be afforded to pharmaceutical products in Canada, they needed to invest 10% of their sales back in research and development. And so I actually ended up joining Lilly as their first CRA in the Canadian affiliate. And so my career grew as the portfolio grew and the team grew in Canada. And I was actually quite fortunate because the chief medical officer that was there, Dr. Steve Bandak, actually placed me in the regulatory area to start, even though I was a CRA. And he felt it was really important to instill the importance of GCP and regulations. He felt it was so important for you to understand that as a starting point, and I was very grateful for that, and I really sort of taken that as something to be important with anybody that I've worked with as we move forward. And he also created an environment where we could be creative and grow and do the most what we can. When you work in an affiliate environment, you don't necessarily have always a lot of money. We definitely didn't have a lot of people. And we also were a young organization, both in, we were new to, because of this new bill that was passed, but also in age. And so we also had a lot of fun. So my career grew, and as well as I personally grew up with the affiliate. And so every about 18 months and 2 years, I got more and more responsibility and went into middle management. And I actually was confronted with a male supervisor during that tenure. And that male supervisor was kind-hearted, and he actually was trying to help, but he fundamentally thought, if I was going to be successful in the pharmaceutical industry, I should change my characteristics, and I should maybe stop laughing and perhaps maybe dress more like a man. And I really listened to him, but I thought I really needed to be my authentic self, believe in who I am, and I thought that's how I could be the best employee I possibly could be for Lilly. And so I sort of just continued on, and I got the reputation of being a builder. Is probably the best way, somebody who built organizations and built new ways of working. And so they approached me and asked me to move out to Asia Pacific and build a new organization out there. And then all roads eventually lead. For those of you that don't know, the head office for Lilly is in Indianapolis, Indiana, and so all roads eventually lead there. And then I got responsibility for global statistical operations and then global head of data sciences and solutions. And then my last tenure was the global head of clinical innovation. And then that made sense because I had these diverse cross-portfolio global clinical experiences, and sort of all that learning, all that experience really helped put together this very dynamic group. And we really started to focus on coming up with newer and better ways to conduct clinical research and try and do that to benefit the industry. And so that really was sort of an awesome opportunity to round out my career at Lilly. And obviously when you're working on these new and better ways to possibly look at research, technology and digitization and working with different members in the health industry and ecosystem became part of that. And obviously throughout my entire career, technology had been a part of it. And so even from the beginning, like when I was back in Canada, we were working on fluoxetine, which is known as Prozac, and we found it was cheaper to work with a local tech company and build a remote data capture system to fund the work to do that fluoxetine work rather than the CRO, never envisioning it would go anywhere. So technology has sort of always been a part of it. And so I guess then from that, I always wanted to see clinical research being done better, being done faster, being easier for the humans that were engaged in it, and really feel that technology is an enabler to make that happen. And so eventually, though I never thought I would actually be at a large company like Oracle, I have developed relationships with the leaders at this company, and so it ultimately led for me to be here. And one of the reasons I am here is that they actually have developed a new platform that I think could unlock some new ways of thinking, and I'm really intrigued by that. I think the pharmaceutical industry we really need to change the way we are thinking, and I'd really like to be part of that, and I'd really like to still see us do things in a very different way than we have done in the past, and if I can be part of that, I'd really like to do that. So that's what sort of brought me here.
That's fascinating. So from being one of the first CROs to now changing how drug development does at a technology company. And then with all that global experience, so what is one of the biggest, the biggest learnings from having that global perspective? Because when you talk to women and they plotting out their careers, so many times one of the biggest pieces of advice is to take a global job if you can, if it's offered to you. Do you think that really was part of your career makeup that really helped accelerate you?
I do. So I have a family with children, and so I think it's an important decision to consider that as well. So, and it's not easy because it is a big change for everybody involved. And it is also a great experience for everybody involved. So I went to all English-speaking countries and locations, and so that is something that helps with the transition. However, the cultures are very different, and so even though I worked at Lilly for those 30 years, I really feel I did work at very different companies. I felt that Canada was extremely different than I actually was located when I was in Asia Pacific. I was located in Sydney, Australia. It couldn't be a more beautiful location to be in. And then also being in Indianapolis, Indiana, I feel in each of those instances I actually felt I was working at a very different company. The reason for that is that the culture is different. The work ethic is influenced by the culture. The talent that's located in that area, they are motivated by different things based on their culture and their environment. And then when you travel around that area, you really need to learn and listen and I believe, sort of behave and really understand what's going on there. And so I feel when I actually came to Indianapolis, the head office, and we would talk about what is needed on the global stage, I felt I was more equipped and actually could offer real live examples, having worked in Asia Pacific and actually having worked in Canada, even though a lot of people think it's very similar to the United States. It is different because the healthcare systems are different and the way people make decisions are different and the population is different, that I could actually talk about, hey, when you think about going global or you think about interacting with these markets or you think about what's important to them, we need to think about getting this type of data or this type of information, or perhaps think about sequencing and these things in this way. And I could speak about that in a very practical way where others just didn't know what they didn't know. And so I think it helped accelerate things. I think it brought more credibility to the table. And I guess on the family side, what it helped my children with is they knew that when a significant change happened, that they would get through it and they will be okay. And so I really didn't realize at the time I was giving them a skill and a confidence that now in their later life that they really value. And they also, it's given them more confidence as they now go into their working career that that I was unaware that I was actually going to provide them by giving them on these excursions and so forth. And so that was actually an unintended consequence that came out of this as well. So though it's hard and though you need to be mindful of it, and I realize it's a different experience for everyone else, it ended up being a fabulous experience for my career. And it actually also gave sort of a foundation to my children as they started their career because it gave them confidence in knowing that they could take on more challenging opportunities and they know that they can actually go through significant change and know that that's okay because there are ups and downs and there's hard things and that they'll be okay on the end of it. So.
Yeah, and look, they got their passports stamped like the kids don't get to do today. So that's amazing. You gave them an amazing journey. So that's wonderful.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about innovation now. Your title is Global Head of Clinical Innovation. And innovation means different things to different people. So how do you define innovation in your current role?
So this is interesting because when I was Global Head of Innovation in Lilly, actually as a team, we talked about this a lot. And so we sort of think of, I guess, so I really was influenced by us as a group talking about that. And simplistically, I've brought that to this role and probably need to test it as we move forward. But I think of it as being a new way and that new way needs to be better. It just can't be different. So when you think of it as a new way, and what's that new way for? Well, that new way needs to meet a customer or a user's need. It just can't be just a new way. It needs a new way that is better to actually meet a customer need. And I guess what you get into is sometimes a customer doesn't know what that need is, but they sure as heck know when something's wrong, or they sure as heck know that they have a problem, or they sure as heck know that there is an issue. Sometimes they articulate the solution, and I think what we have to sort of separate is when they articulate the solution, they could be dead on and they could be right, but sometimes when they articulate that solution, the need and the problem is still embedded in there. And so I think it requires us to be really listening and try and walk in their shoes and be in their environment and be empathetic and really try to understand them and really try and figure out what that real need is. But if I take away all that extra stuff, it's just really to find a new and better way to meet that customer's need to me, that's what innovation is.
Fantastic. And speaking of innovation, you lead the global, as we said, the global innovation at Oracle in terms of the healthcare practice or the life sciences business. And this is a new business unit within Oracle, correct?
That's correct.
So your global team consists of how many people?
Well, as of today, 2. But when I started in February, yes. When I started in February, it was 1, just me. And so the leader of our business unit, Steve Rosenberg, had this vision of bringing this new capability to the health sciences global business unit, and he tapped me to take on the leadership role for this, so I was honored to do that. And really what he was looking for is for me to take a global view, so bring that global experience I had, which I'm happy to do, and to really try and influence the broader health sciences global business unit, and as well as outside the organization, and so do similar things that I had done in previous work and previous activities. So don't be constrained by the fact that we're just Oracle. Try and look at the broader ecosystem and then also understand what Oracle has and has to offer. And then determine what it is that is needed in order to try and achieve the mission and vision that I believe in collaboration with the lead team that needs to be fulfilled in order to help make the clinical research or health business better, so for everybody, based on the work that we're doing. So, and right now, I guess, I brought someone on board that has a different set of more scientifically focused. I'm more clinical research focused. Then I'm looking for someone that understands healthcare a little bit better, way better than I do. And so really trying to bring people on board that have a way different experience and different skill set and knowledge set than what I have, so that we can start expanding our knowledge base and having innovations in different areas that can help benefit the broader ecosystem. But right now to go back to your question, yes, trying to cover. So I've been focusing most of my attention on clinical research initially, because that's the space I know best, and then broadening it out to other sectors as we bring more and more people on board.
Fantastic. Can you identify maybe your top 2-3 priorities as you go forward over the next 6 months, now that you have, 10 months behind you?
Yeah. So basically, give a little bit of background on the first part. So I spent the first really trying to validate what the problems are. And how I did that was actually going to people in their own backyard. So talking to pharma, biotech, CROs, healthcare providers. I'm now trying to figure out how to talk to patients, but getting to them in their own backyard, in their own environment, and actually saying, are these real problems, and so forth. And so trying to gather that information and getting confirming that these are really, really important problems to them. Now what I'm focusing on is working with individuals to actually run experiments on what it might take to solve those problems short-term and long-term, and then determining what we should do to actually then, once we've confirmed perhaps how we would solve those problems, do we actually build those internally here within Oracle and add that to our product suite? Do we partner with people that are out there in the ecosystem and develop partnerships? Because Oracle is quite comfortable and very familiar with doing those types of partnerships. Or in many cases, like we've done with other things, is we might do some acquisitions. And so really work with the lead team and come with recommendations on what we should do short-term and long-term, and then prioritize how we should do that. what areas we should go after first, what areas to go after second. And I have my eye on the healthcare professional that works at the research facility. So that group of humans that are actively involved in clinical research right now, I feel they're very heavily burdened. I feel that it's really important to start and lighten that burden. I feel I was part of that working at pharma. I didn't mean to do that. I apologize to them. That was not my intent. So I would like to help to lighten that load. And I'd like to prevent kind of that moving on to the patients. I think through patient centricity, I think that's the right thing to do. I think that there's a chance that technology will be part of that patient centricity. I don't want to see that burden land on the patients as well. And I think we want to get in front of that, and we want to help that experience with the patients to be really good and not repeat what we did with the investigators and see a similar outcome. And so try and get in front of that. And so really look at how do we manage both of those things, as well as, do the right by them. So really having conversations about what's manageable, how do we support that in the clinical research space, while in parallel kicking off some other activities in healthcare so that we then can manage that. So hopefully that sounds clear. So ask me questions if that sounded maybe a little bit jumbled. So ask me if that wasn't clear.
That's great. No, it was totally clear. So I'd love to really dig in a little bit deeper in terms of where you think those areas within the clinical research paradigm, ecosystem, whatever you want to call it, along that chain, need the biggest piece of innovative change. Is it in the patient recruitment? Is it in the patient retention? Is it recruiting patients? Is it, I know a big focus for you right now is on decentralized trials, and I'd love to talk about that because I think there's a lot of chat now between siteless and virtual, and the term that you introduced me to was decentralized trials. So tell me about that area.
Yeah, so so before we jump into decentralized trials, I guess one of the areas I am trying to work on is more of a mind shift change, which I know is hard, and it links to the decentralized trials, is that what I feel we've done in pharma, and I experienced this, and I've experienced this with a lot of my colleagues as well, is that I think we've done a really great job implementing point solutions. And I would really love to see us to get to more of thinking digitally, which is a mindset, culture, process change, where technology really could be leveraged to help us support compound development plans, designing protocols, executing trials, doing enrollment, doing decentralized trials, like you said, so that we actually think digitally and we really empower staff to get access to information, to making decisions, and we actually have information, data, tools, things are more readily available rather than getting together as a bunch of individuals and talking and making decisions together through conversation. We really have analytical tools and simulations and things to help us actually pull large quantities of data together rather than large quantities of people together to actually make decisions. So that's one thing I'd like us to see. And then I think that would help us actually do things like decentralized trials. What decentralized trials means to me is that you would actually have a scientific question that you're trying to answer in a protocol, and you would really know what data is absolutely essential to support the label that you would like to have for that particular compound, and the patient population that you're looking to validate the safety and efficacy to support that label. And you would actually design the experiment through the protocol that you'd like to run it, and you would make it as easy as possible for those healthcare providers and those participants in that protocol to participate in that particular trial, to get that data to answer those scientific questions. And so you would take into account where those healthcare providers would be and where those participants or those patients would be. And then you would marry it up to what that data would be. And so you would then, that's how you would actually do it. And so if that means that it should be done in rural areas or in people's homes, or it should be in local medical facilities, or it should perhaps maybe should be a combination of research facilities as well as maybe and closer to people's homes, then all of that would be factored into how you actually should run it, because that would produce the best way to actually generate the information you need to answer the scientific question. And so what you're doing is, rather than having all the participants come to one location, which is sort of centralized, and gather the information, you're actually allowing it for it to be decentralized, and actually you're going to where the information could be collected and making it easier for that information to be collected, because hopefully that will increase the speed in which you collect it, the quality that you can collect it, and it'll be easier for everyone to collect it. And by doing that, then that, you probably need good control systems and technology, and you need to make sure everyone's properly supported and they have the knowledge to do that, and you need to be able to monitor the safety of the patients appropriately, and people need to be well informed about what they're doing. And everything exists to allow that to happen, but the mindset of the individuals to actually approach research that way, and then the knowledge of the individuals to know that everything exists so that they could actually put all that in place. A lot of people don't even know that exists. Right. So like, how do they even begin to even be aware that they can actually put that in place? Sure. And all that type of stuff. So, it's kind of like that chicken and the egg. Like, what you often see is that people have this protocol, and then they know that some of these technologies exist, and then they try and apply them after the protocol's been written. And so then you get this point solution effect.
No, which is the opposite of what you're trying to change, which is to think more digitally from the outset. So you can't apply a digital strategy on top of something that's already done. It has to be done in conjunction, correct?
That's right. And I think right now the pharmaceutical industry just isn't wired that way. They're very people focused. Like they still are very much, they get a large group of people together, key opinion leaders. They get, to give advice. They get a large group of people internally within the company to discuss the protocol. And there's nothing wrong. Like, I'm not trying to be critical of that. I think all that's good. It's just that somehow we need to figure out a way to help bring more of a digital mindset, a digital culture, digital process in there. Otherwise, it's really hard to make that transition to this type of way of working and to really get the value out of it. It's really challenging. And I think right now we're feeling the pains of the point solution approach. That's what I think is really painful right now. So we're trying things. We're putting stuff in, we're piloting things, but we really haven't taken that larger leap of some are actually, so I wouldn't say it's mainstream, but I would say some are, and they're really actually starting to see the value of it, where I still think I would really want to try and help people see the value of kind of just going, just a little bit further, like taking maybe 3 or 4 more steps, and then they can really see just how unlocking that and how more benefit can come out of, just helping releasing that and unlocking the ability to think more digitally, and just how more advantageous and freeing and helpful that can be for everyone involved.
Perfect. And so that people don't freak out, it doesn't mean going to a decentralized kind of approach, means taking the HCP out of the equation, because that's not the case.
No, it's actually, if anything, it's humans are still all involved, so the study team's still involved, and the healthcare provider is still involved, and the patient's still involved. But it's like what I said when you said what is innovation. It's doing something hopefully in a new and better way, and using technology to enable it, versus doing it the same way and just putting technology in place of it. And I think that's the key, is we have to start thinking about how to do it. You have to almost re-engineer some of this stuff, and then realize now technology can enable you to do it this way. So it is different when you do data collection outside of a research facility, rather than just assume, oh, well, we're now going to just collect this data outside of a research facility and use the technology to do that. I think we just need to realize that almost need to re-engineer that, just not assume it's the same. Well, we've just taken out of the research facility, now we're just going to collect it this way. I think that's what gets people a little bit in trouble. You have to re-engineer it a bit, and you need to think about that more holistically. And I'd love to help people with that. That's kind of part of my journey of what I've done with innovation over the last many years, is let's just help with that kind of mindset, that kind of cultural change, that process change, and what that means for everyone involved, so everyone feels really comfortable with that type of change.
That was a great explanation in terms of defining how the decentralized trials are really going to provide, I think you're right, a new pathway forward in terms of looking at how trials are conducted in the future. And I couldn't agree with you more in terms of the digital aspect. I think that technology is going to be the piece of the puzzle that is going to solve so many of the challenges that plague clinical trials right now and drug development. So it does require a change in the mindset, and I think that leaders of today really need to get comfortable with that, because they're going to be pushed, because patients are going to be demanding more value from the drugs, and companies need to derive more value from their pipelines, and that's the way to do it.
I agree with you.
So earlier on, you had said that you had been identified as a builder, as one of your leadership skill sets. How else do you define your leadership style?
I believe my leadership style is actually situational. So I really like to get to know the people I'm working with, and I like to find out if what they're doing, is this something new, or is this something they've done before? Are they really highly motivated to do it, or is this the last thing they wanted to do on earth? And so, because we all, in our jobs, right, we all have stuff we love to do, and there's stuff we have to do. And it's life. Wouldn't it be awesome if, everything we did in our job we just always wanted to do? But there's stuff in my job, like you have to do. It's just the way it has to go. So I really try and get to know that from the team members. And, if it's possible and you can do everything you love to do, and you had other member teams that picks up everything, that would be great. But unfortunately, life doesn't always deal you that deck of cards. So, and then what I do is there's actually a course I took called Situational Leadership. And it was actually one of my favorite courses, and a huge light bulb went on. And I thought, wow, this is really insightful. So, and I combined that with, I also learned how people like to communicate. So certain people, they like to be really chatty. Other people like to get right to the point. Some people like to incorporate their feelings. Some people just want the facts. And so you sort of learn that about how people like to communicate. And so I tried to combine sort of those three things together. And so with and you don't do this you don't do this holistically. You actually try and do this when you're actually doing some key things within your job. And even though you might have the most experienced person from your team that you've worked with for multiple years, I always found it was really good to even say, hey, have you ever done this before? And, this is something you're excited about doing. And you'd be surprised what you hear. And so we'd always sort of have a conversation about, so how can I help you with this? Do you need me to prompt you because it's always going to be the bottom of your to-do list and, you want to get it done, or, do you want me to give you some advice on some training that you might take so you can actually get it better, or do you want to run things, let's check in like at the beginning of the week and so you can run by how you're going and they can give you some coaching on it. So I always found situational leadership was really good, and I think really understanding how your people and your team want to communicate with you is so important, because there's nothing worse than having somebody who's really chatty, really wanting to work with somebody who just wants the facts. Like if you want to really irritate your employees really, really quickly, that two combinations doesn't work. So that's funny. Yeah. So that's what I found worked really well for me, and those are probably the two things over my development and all that I felt has worked really, really well for me. And that helped me build a lot of things. So, and I couldn't have done it without my team. So,
fantastic. Speaking of teams, you are a role model to so many women out there, because there are just so few women sitting in those global lead positions. So do you feel that weight of responsibility?
Oh, gosh. I don't. But it's interesting because I get reminded of it by my son, and he has this group of women that he hangs out with, and he reminds me that I have a fan club with them. Pieces that they look up to me, and he introduces me to them, and I talk to them sometimes, which was eye-opening one time. So thank you to them, and I'm honored that that's the case. They're in their early 20s. There is a group of women in my neighborhood that I recently have started to get to know, and I've also started to help them if they need anything. And so I was and happy to do that anytime. So I guess I wasn't aware of it initially. Probably over the last 5 years, I've become more and more probably aware of it, and I am always eager to help, support, mentor, provide guidance. And so that is probably a little more eye-opening to me than I had thought. So in the past, I guess I just felt like I was doing my job, and I continually wanted to take on more responsibility because I wanted to see drugs get to market. I wanted to see drug development change. I was really passionate about the cause. I really wanted to help. And in fairness, this may sound really bizarre, it was really my children that brought it to my attention. That I was probably more of a role model to other women than anybody else.
So I'm glad that they brought it to your attention. Let's talk about, is there a piece of advice you would give to your younger self, something you wish you knew then that you know now?
Yes. I give this advice when someone asks me what advice I would give them. You hire your direct opposite as soon as you possibly can. So, because then when you and your new teammate are a whole. So, that would be the best advice. And if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, give me a call and I can explain it to you. But there are things that you're really good at, and there's things that you're really strong at, and that's just your natural tendency. So it comes out in stress. It comes out when you're really motivated and so forth. but there's another individual out there that is really good at other things that no matter what, you're probably just not good at. I'm not good at certain things. And I probably can do them, but they're not the best things I can do. And so you have to hire. I strongly encourage you to hire a direct opposite. The challenge of that is they're not naturally the person you're going to gravitate to.
That makes sense, because they're not exactly like you.
Right.
And so that's great advice, and I appreciate that. Finally, is there one wow moment of your career that you can pick out?
Yes. So close your eyes, and I'm going to take you to Sydney, Australia. And it's going to be beautiful. And I was the Chief Operation Officer of this newly envisioned Clinical Outcomes and Research Institute that hasn't been built. And there were leaders at Lilly that had this bright idea that they were going to sign this proposal with the government and sign up to a yearly commitment for the next 4 years to invest, to deliver a research commitment that was like outrageous. And when I got there and I arrived and they showed me what this yearly commitment and research was, I was actually speechless. I actually didn't say anything. I just sort of said, oh, okay. And so if this achievement around this investment in research and development across Asia Pacific was met, what that meant for Lilly is that the Australian government would actually pay Lilly revenue for the cost of pharmaceutical products. Because what happens is the cost of pharmaceutical products is different around the world. And so Australia's prices are traditionally a lot lower than what they call the global price. And so what would happen is the Australian government would make up, if we pick certain products, they would make up the difference between the Australian price and the global price, and they would actually pay us, Lilly, the money for the difference, provided we met our commitments that were put into this agreement that someone signed. So big breath, because I went, okay, whoa. And so this was the only time in my career that I would actually bring revenue into the company, because R&D spends money. Clinical research spends money. So this was the only time in my career I'd actually be a revenue generator. And so, but it, again, like I'll say this again, I can't really disclose what, but the goals were outrageous. Like the amount, like I was like, are you guys crazy? So anyway, I pulled an initial team together. They were all Australian born. Some of them I recruited from outside of Australia, so they're in the UK or whatever. So we brought the brain drain back. So everyone was Australian born. We learned together. We worked really hard. I was impressed by the global awareness of the employee base and the ingenuity. It comes from, being a cross-country environment, a lot of the affiliate and all that. I'm proud to say that the team grew, but the core team stayed intact the entire 4 years that we were together, that they exceeded the goal. We had lots of celebrations around all that because I can't even, we did it. They exceeded the goal. And the experience that this core team acquired was very diverse, and all of them have senior leadership positions across the industry today. Still keep in touch with them. So now in my Oracle role, I've actually crossed, because I'm traveling quite a bit to, do some of this validation, so I've popped in on some of these companies. I've already touched base with at least 3 of them, like in their senior VP of this and senior executive of this, and it's been so lovely to actually see them, be able to give them a hug, and after all these years and stuff like that, they're all doing great. And it's just wonderful to see them, see them leading in the ecosystem. And it was just a pleasure to work with them and learn from them and be with them in Australia and to actually achieve this goal. They were great.
It was really a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate you asking the questions, and I love the conversation, and really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of WOW, the Woman of the Week podcast series. And thanks again to Calcium for sponsoring this episode. For more information, visit calciumusa.com. And don't forget to check out our other episodes at pharmavoice.com/wow. This 2019 program is copyrighted by PharmaLinks, LLC.